Hello, welcome to my first video. I thought I would start this out by reading a little bit from the Warhammer 40,000 Adepta Sororitas Codex. I'm a big fan of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and I think a good introduction to what this universe is all about is the codexes, but specifically I think the Adepta Sororitas does really well, showing the grimdark, futuristic, dogmatic aspects of this universe. So I think we'll take a look inside. Just read a little bit from it. And we'll take a look at the artwork as well. So obviously, first and foremost, we have the table of contents. And I've always said that I love a good table of contents. I think that the Warhammer codexes very plainly, but stylistically, lay out what they've got. I appreciate it. Let me get right into some of the things that make the codexes very fun to look at. They have the full spread of models that you can get and paint up and play with as part of their tabletop experience. I am by no means an authority on the Adepta Sororitas, but I do think that's Saint Celestine up there, and the black and red faction on the left page, I believe, is the Order of Our Martyred Lady. I think they're the poster boy, or poster girl rather, of the Sisters of Battle faction, in a similar way that the Ultramarines are for the Space Marine faction. Over here on the right, you have my favorite Sisters of Battle. These are the Order of the Bloody Rose. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that their sigil, the white and red rose, is supposed to harken back to the Lancastrians of English history. We'll see that the counterpart to the Order of the Bloody Rose, the Order of the Sacred Rose, I think they're supposed to be the Yorkists, if you guys are familiar with your English medieval history. Anyway, here we have some of the heavy metal style artwork. I think is kind of, it's the quintessential Warhammer artwork from the early days of the story. It's really reminiscent of the artwork that's done by John Blanche, I think is how you say his name. And as we all know, he passed away not too long ago, and I'm not sure if this is his work specifically or if it's just another artist that emulated his style, but it's a very signature style of work. Warriors of the Faith. The orders of the Adepta Sororitas are the defenders of the Imperial Creed. In the name of the God Emperor of mankind do they wage wars of faith, To bear witness to such a conflict is to be awestruck with the force of the sisterhood's righteous fervor and unwavering belief. As these holy warriors march to war, battle psalms ring out from consecrated voxcasters, the refrain taken up by each and every sister of battle. From the firmament, warriors equipped with winged jump packs descend on columns of fire to mete out the Emperor's judgment. The sisters go to battle equipped with elaborately crafted war gear, their tanks and transports illuminated with sacred writings and bedecked with holy reliquaries. The battle sisters of the Adepta Sororitas bear weapons synonymous with the imperial faith. The bolter, the flamer, and the melt-weapons form a holy trinity of destructive firepower with which to obliterate the faithless. The Emperor's blessings also accompany the Adepta Sororitas to war, his miraculous power manifesting itself in deeds of supernatural fortitude and divine strength. The blasphemer, the heretic, the mutant, and the Xenos. No enemy of the faith is safe from the righteous wrath of the Adepta Sororitas. All face the judgment of the God Emperor. And here on the left we have some more gorgeous modern artwork for the faction. Again, my favorites, the Order of the Bloody Rose. No bias, but I think they're the coolest. And maybe that's just because they wear all red armor, I'm not sure. But they still look very cool, very striking on the battlefield and the tabletop. And again, I'm no authority on their lore, but I think the sisters that hold these relics and have these, are they called wimples, I think, or head shawls, I'm not sure. They have these reliquaries and these books, and they're giving last rites to fallen sisters. I think they come from a non-militant order of the religious cult at large. I think they're called the Orders Hospitaller. Again, I don't know for sure. I guess we'll find out when we go further into the Codex. The Ecclesiarchy. To the teeming masses of humanity, there is no more important a figure than the God Emperor. It is he who defends them against the galaxy's many abominations and from whom they draw strength. The galaxy-spanning official religion that encompasses his worship is the Imperial Creed, its rite and ritual administered and overseen by the Ecclesiarchy and its sanctity defended by the Adepta Sororitas. The Sisterhood at War. The orders militant of the Adepta Sororitas are strictly organized and highly disciplined military organizations, created and outfitted to meet any threat to the imperial faith. They are elite forces whose members are amongst the most skilled of humanity's unaugmented warriors. Empowered by their faith, these pious combatants seek to purge the heretic and slaughter the alien wherever they appear, preserving the sanctity of the Emperor's realm. I don't think any existence in the Imperium of Mankind is particularly great, but I think it gets pretty low if you're a male member or male thrall of the Adepta Sororitas, like this gentleman here. Obviously, the priests are mostly men, and the sisters are mostly women, hence their name. But the lower classes of pilgrim, warrior pilgrim, I don't think they have a very fun time. Not to say that the sisters don't go through it as well. The nature of faith. The Imperial Creed teaches that those who display pious devotion to the Emperor may earn his favor and receive his blessings in their hour of need. Indeed, those who have fought alongside armies of the faith, particularly the Adepta Sororitas, report all manner of miraculous occurrences. Battle sisters wreathed in halos of golden light, eyes blazing with holy fire to ignite their enemies. Flocks of white doves appearing from the ether to soar above the field of battle, the dead rising to strike a final blow in the name of their God Emperor. All these events and more have been witnessed and recorded. Although I think the witnesses and those recording are probably just as religiously devoted as the ones who claim to experience those miracles. Some of them, I'm sure, are legitimate, but you have to wonder if the biases are accounted for. Probably not. Wars of faith. The greatest expression of the ecclesiarchy's divine wrath are its wars of faith. Declared by the ecclesiarch, these wars are waged in the name of retribution, liberation, and wrathful hatred. When such a war begins, those orders who can respond to the call send their best warriors to obliterate the heretics and traitors marked for death. These are probably as close as you can get to a crusade, outside of calling it a crusade. I think the Black Templar Space Marines kind of have a monopoly on crusades. As with any organization in the Imperium of Mankind, there has to be a Byzantine labyrinth of organization. The God Emperor, he's obviously the one in charge of it all. Below him is the Abbess Sanctorum of the Adepta Sororitas. She is the exactor of the God Emperor's will. And below the abbess are the two prioress. There's only two of them. There's one for the convent prioress, which is based on Holy Terra, that is, Earth, and the convent sanctorum on Ophelia 7. Those two are directly below the abbess sanctorum. And below each prioress is the command staff for each of the orders. And in the order command, you have the leader for the entire order, the Canoness Superior. And she is advised and accompanied by a command squad, which is her Imagifier, Imagifier, and her Celestian bodyguard. And of course, at the upper level of command, each order also has Frateris Templar battleships, or naval assets, cruiser squadrons, secondary escort squadrons, Confessors Militant. Your guess is as good as mine as to what those are. Tempestus Scion companies, which are basically special forces. They do suborbital drops, jetpack combat, very cool stuff. Then you have the Frateris Militia Auxiliary Forces. I do believe those are raised on each individual planet or each individual shrine world. The planets within each order's protection, kind of like a planetary defense force, but religiously motivated. Then below the order command is a preceptory. I think nominally there are 10 preceptories, although I'm sure numbers fluctuate and they go above or below the 10. So as you can see indicated here, for the second preceptory of an order, for example, these are going to be identical, but I chose to illuminate the second. You have the preceptory command, very similar to order command. That's the sister in charge of the entire preceptory, and she has her own command squad. And below each preceptory is a commandery. Each commandery, similar to the command staff above it, has a canoness commander and their own command squad. And each commandery maintains its own organic assets. So the Sisters Hospitaller, as I mentioned earlier on one of the previous pages, are these medical staff nuns administering last rites and healing the sick and the wounded. I think I didn't even realize this, but there's one over here as well, carrying off a dead or wounded sister. Then each commandery also has its own battle tanks. I think they're mostly based on Rhino chassis. And you have a bunch of other assets. I think the most notable here are the Arco flagellants, and penitent engines. And we'll see some more of that later. It's worth noting that these structures are very similar to the legions of old for Space Marines. I think it's just a normal, 10 by 10 command structure that works. But the commanderies, as it says here, have only up to 200 sisters. So, not quite as many as, or actually double the amount of a Space Marine chapter, if these preceptories are supposed to be, company rather, double the amount of a Space Marine company, if these are supposed to be company equivalents, and these are supposed to be chapter equivalents, the orders being legions. I think you have a little bit more going on for the orders than you did back in the day for the legions. Of course, these are unaugmented humans. Not as much time and resources are allocated to the Sisters of Battle, so they're comparatively probably cheaper to maintain. But below each commandery is a mission. These are probably comparable to the demi-companies of Space Marines or platoons within the Astra Militarum. They only have a few squads, it seems. 5 squads here. Then you have over here, you have the 2 convents, each one led by a prioress. So the Orders Militant are and this list is not exhaustive, this is just for example, but the Orders Militant are each of the combat-oriented orders of sisters. So, the orders militant at the Convent Sanctorum, based on Ophelia 7, you have Order of Our Martyred Lady, the black and red uniformed sisters, the most popular faction, or sub-faction rather. Then you have the Order of the Valorous Heart. I'm not sure what their paint scheme is. But then you have my favorites, of course, the Order of the Bloody Rose. And then their counterparts over here, Orders Militant. You have the Order of the Ebon Chalice, Order of the Argent Shroud, and the Order of the Sacred Rose. Those are the white rose sigil wearing sisters. Then down here, each convent has a couple orders hospitaller listed. These are the medical ones. These might only be for, well, I'm not going to speculate, but my assumption would be when they operate as an order, they maintain religious sanctums and medical facilities, but they might donate or have their sisters be seconded to the sisters of the Orders Militant to act as medical staff when needed. That might be a similar instance to when I think corpsmen in the United States Marine Corps leave the Navy to serve with United States Marines. Separate organizations, but they second staff to fulfill a role that they wouldn't otherwise have filled. Heroes and Martyrs. It is a cornerstone of the Adepta Sororitas martial culture to revere saints and martyrs and to strive to live up to the examples set by the matriarchs. A willingness to suffer and die for the cause is prevalent in every one of their orders, and thus their ranks produce many storied champions. Here you have Morven Val. She is the Abbess Sanctorum, so she's the top dog. And you can tell she's important because she's got a huge mech suit. I don't think they'd give that to, you know, some scrub. And then you have Saint Celestine. Again, I don't know 100% about her origins, or rather, which version of her is currently the one running around, but I hesitate to use the word reincarnation, but I don't know what else to call it. Sisters are elevated to sainthood through Saint Celestine's form. And now she descends when sisters need her most. Or maybe I just heard that from somebody else when they tried to explain it to me. Or maybe I'm getting Celestine confused with Ephrael Stern. I think she is the one that I'm thinking of that gets resurrected or reincarnated. I'm not sure. She seems like a bad person to meet on the battlefield, though. Alright, now here we have some of the orders, of course. The most popular and most showcased one, the Order of Our Martyred Lady. You also have the Order of the Valorous Heart. Suffering is to be expected and pain to be embraced. Each torturous agony inflicted upon our flesh brings us closer to the matriarch. If we are to aspire to her example, then we must endure as she endured. We must remain pure of heart and strong of faith, no matter the horrors inflicted upon our mortal forms. All praise to Saint Lucia, all praise to the God Emperor. I'd like to think I have a high pain tolerance, but I don't think I would last long with the Order of the Valorous Heart. Absolution through pain does not sound like my idea of a good time. Then you got my girls, the Order of the Bloody Rose, the Fires of Righteous Anger. The Order of the Bloody Rose are the embodiment of the Emperor's hatred toward the heretic, the psyker, and the mutant. Their wars of faith are not waged to save the innocent, but to slaughter the guilty, for only in death can the vile be made pure. So they're not the nicest ladies out there. They don't really believe in rehabilitation as much as they do in retribution, but they still look cool. Over here you have their counterpart, Order of the Sacred Rose. I think they're a little bit nicer than the ones clad in red. The Light of Battle's Serenity. The Order of the Sacred Rose march to war, singing hymns of hope and salvation. Their lilting voices lifting the spirits of the beleaguered faithful, their bolt guns and flamers unleashing their holy wrath in a storm of violence. Did not mean to hiccup there. We have some of the minor orders here. These are just very small compared to the larger ones. Order of the Blue Robe, I think, is my favorite small one, and that's just because they're blue. I think that kind of breaks the usual trend of dark and sullen colors. Blacks and reds and grays, some silver and gold might be sprinkled in there, but very little blue. Here we go, the non-militant orders. Orders Hospitaller. The Sisters of the Orders Hospitaller provide surgeons, physicians, and nurses to many arms of the imperial military. The sisters of these orders express their faith by tending to the wounded in horrific battlefield conditions, performing surgery on warriors felled by jagged shrapnel, digging filth and contagion from open wounds, and administering rites to those beyond salvation. Compassionate and dignified, the Sisters Hospitaller are often regarded as holy figures by those to whom they tend. I'm going to move on to some of the pictures here. A showcase of models, vestments of purity. The Adepta Sororitas go to war clad in the traditional colors of their order. Icons, sigils, and other trappings of the imperial creed adorn their finely crafted power armor. Scrolls and scriptures trail from their power armor, inscribed with holy prayers, psalms, and blessings. Each battle sister is a walking beacon of the imperial creed, whose countenance inspires awe in the faithful. So on the left here, you see a bunch of different paint schemes with each respective sigil for their order. So obviously the most popular one, the most featured one, is the Order of Our Martyred Lady. There's a battle sister. Over here we have the less glamorous side of the Sisters of Battle. You have a penitent engine over here. As we had briefly talked about earlier, that doesn't seem like a very fulfilling existence. Although some in the universe would argue that that's a fate they deserve for one crime or another. He just doesn't look like he's enjoying himself very much. And of course, the arco-flagellants, men and women alike, turned into shock troops, lobotomites. And over here you have a Repentia Superior. She has the alternate build to the one over here. Kind of interesting that this one has a whip in one hand and a whip in the other. I think there's an alternate build for her left arm where she has something else in her hand so that she doesn't have two whips, although if you want two whips, go ahead. But in the lore, the Repentia superiors are very strict, tough officers in the Battle Sisters orders who were tasked with commanding these penitent hosts of either deserters or criminals or religious extremists on the opposite side, rather than just send them to be executed or otherwise punished. They strip them of their armor, give them two-handed chain swords, and send them into battle. If they do well and they show promise, they get reinducted into the ranks of the Sisters of Battle, and they can serve once again as a battle sister. If they die, they've absolved themselves of their sins, and life goes on. Although, that doesn't do you any good. Now, if they return to the line squads of the Sisters of Battle, and then they commit another grave sin that would normally require them to return to be a Repentia, they get turned into an arco-flagellant. So, you get one freebie. You break the rules. Well, if you break a serious rule, they can't really just punish anybody these days. They're low on manpower, or woman power, rather. But you break the rules once, you become a Sister Repentia. You break the rules twice, they strip you of all your freedom, and they turn you into a mindless drone. In the vehicle section of this, they get they turn all their vehicles into basically cathedrals. Mobile cathedrals with organs that shoot missiles and all manner of inscription and illumination detailing them. Here again we have Saint Celestine and her Gemini Superior. They do heavily remind me of the Blood Angels and their Sanguinary Guard. That might just because they have wings and they're gold. But regardless, the same notes are there. And of course you have other jetpack wearing infantry. These ones being Seraphim and Zephyrim. And then down here you can see the sisters are in jetpack combat with another notable wielder of jetpacks, the Night Lords. Comment down below what your opinion of the Night Lords is. We see another very beautiful two-page spread of the Sisters of Battle, this time fighting the greenskins, the orcs. And I do believe that's Morven Val over there with some Paragon war suits. If you look back over here, we can see our friends, the Penitent Engines. Arco-flagellants right here. Again, they're shock troops. They usually send them in first to soften up the enemy defenses. Against orcs, I think they would fare quite well, although I think once you really get into the nitty-gritty of hand-to-hand combat with an orc, if you miss with these arco-flagellants, the little tendrils, I think you're in for a world of hurt. Again, St. Celestine's over here, making an appearance. Some Seraphim, or maybe Zephyrim, are over here. Back here, we have a unit that we haven't yet seen. I think these are called Novitiates. The equivalent in the Space Marine faction would be Scouts. I think these are supposed to be, in the lore, new recruits getting battle tested. We have Combat Patrol, which is Games Workshop's attempt to bridge the gap between players that are a little overwhelmed with the enormity of Warhammer. A very small game where they give you the rules and what units you're supposed to use and just say, have at it. And of course the painting guide, which we're going to skip that because we're not going to paint today. Some rules for the Combat Patrol. Brief data sheets for the Combat Patrol. And now we're going to get into some of the cool stuff. The individual units. So now we don't have to guess. We can just look at them and see what they are. The army rules. The detachment rules, because each faction has detachments. Basically rule sets that allow you to hone in on a faction's strong suits, usually at the expense of something else. So the Penitent Host, for example, you're going to have to utilize a lot of these arco-flagellants and Penitent Engines, because those are the ones that are going to get bonuses, because the Penitent keyword is what gets buffed. Everything else doesn't really have anything that helps it out. Bringers of Flame. So, hence the name. You think it'd be flame weapon enhancing, and it is. So, weapons that don't usually use flamethrowers, you don't usually bring those. And of course, usually you have armies that are kind of just all around. Although this one, I think, is based off of speed. I have to reread it. All right, the data sheets. So each one of these obviously has the model in question, but also has their rules. Morvenval. Aggressive and taciturn, Morvenval leads the Adepta Sororitas from the front. Taking to the field in an ancient Paragon warsuit, she smites foe after foe with deafening bursts from Fidelis, devastating salvos of missiles, and pinpoint thrusts with the Lance of Illumination. Fidelis, I think, is the weapon on her left hand. Yeah, right here. Looks to be some sort of bolt weapon. St. Celestine over here. I think we've seen enough of her for one video. And the Triumph of St. Catherine. See, sometimes with Games Workshop models, they give you a unit, like Morvenval, for example, and she's just that person. She's a beautiful model. She's on that big base, and that's all she really is that model and that base. Now, you go to something like this, the Triumph of St. Catherine, and it's basically just its own diorama. You got a lot going on here. You got multiple people. You get a color palette beyond just the gold and white of Morvenval. Of course, you can do whatever you want with this, but as it stands, a lot of different surfaces and textures and paints, paint colors. It goes beyond just that of a normal model, and it kind of becomes its own thing, really. It's really quite a beautiful model, or piece. Not to say that models individually can't be beautiful. Like the Canoness model is pretty. With her scepter of fire. And of course you have the tactical rock. You have to have a tactical rock. You have a palatine. I think these are kind of equivalent to lieutenants. They're fighting some Tyranids, it seems. It's a rough go of it. Some more officers. Now over here you have a Ministorum priest, and this is one of those models that has a use outside of just the Adepta Sororitas. I think you can also use this with the Astra Militarum, that being the regular ground foot soldiers. Here we have a Hospitaller. We've talked about them quite a bit. And this one right here is helping a downed sister. Hospitallers are physical and spiritual healers. They possess medicinal expertise and serve as a font of faith for those in need, whispering mantras of vigor to dull pain, and intoning prayers to salve fevered minds. They move swiftly across the battlefield, working solemnly despite the harshest conditions. Mispronounced a few words there, I apologize. Here we get to the core infantry units. And here we finally get to the core infantry of the Sisters of Battle, their data sheets. These are the line infantry, the Battle Sisters squad, and like we had talked about, the Sisters Novitiate squad. Sisters Novitiate are young recruits to the Adepta Sororitas. Trained by the drill abbots of the Scala Progenium, they are assigned an order militant to gain combat experience and prove their mettle in the crucible of war. So a drill abbot is just a sister of rank. That's more like her billet or her posting. She's probably a palatine or something similar, but she's a drill abbot at the Scala Progenium, and those are institutions of learning for orphans. So in the vast majority of cases, I believe the Sisters of Battle are all orphans, and many of them are raised at these Scala Progenium, or Progenia, Scala Progenia, where they are trained in the reverence of the God Emperor. They're trained how to be good servants to the Imperium, and if they show enough martial prowess as well as intelligence, they get inducted into the Sisters Novitiate and later become Sisters of Battle. These drill abbots, they're usually at the Scala Progenium with their students, but when they go to battle as part of a war of faith, they leave those schools with their classes of novitiates to test their mettle. Here's a Dominion squad. These are kind of like a heavy weapons squad for the Sisters. They have the big heavy-hitting weapons. They have the usual bolt guns, of course, but they can also bring meltas, so like anti-tank weaponry. They can bring flamethrowers, plasma pistols, combi weapons, which aren't that great in 10th edition, but in 11th they should have a bit of a rules refresh. Combi weapons are basically, as the name suggests, they're a combination of weapons. So like a bolt gun plus a plasma weapon, or a bolt gun plus a flamer. In 10th edition, which is what this codex is from, they kind of just wrapped all that into one and made it an anti-infantry weapon on critical hits, and then lowered the critical hit ceiling. And 11th, I think you might get to choose between what kind of weapon on that combi weapon you get to use. And then over here is a firm squad we kind of saw earlier, but the Retributor squad. This is another heavy hitting team. You only get 5 of them. So you could get like a heavy flamer, so basically like 2 flamethrowers in one, a multi-melta, you know, multiple anti-tank weapon, a heavy bolter, a really big machine gun, essentially. I'm not exactly sure what role these guys fulfill that the Dominion squad can't also fulfill. I guess the rules rather. You can reroll wound rolls. I mean, their weapon profiles are pretty similar, but I guess the rule interpretation there is different. Here you have some Celestian Sacrosants. Pretty good on melee from what I hear. Yeah, their Anointed Halberd has sustained hits, 3 attacks, 3 up weapon skill, 5 strength, AP -2, and then 1 damage. That's pretty good. You have 10 of them rolling 3 attacks each, and you get sustained hits, so. Which, of course, sustained hits means if you roll a 6 with your die, that counts as an extra hit. So you're probably going to be converting quite a few hits. That is, a hit that normally would miss, a different die rolls at 6, so now you make up for the one you hit, or the one you missed. And then 3 up weapon skill. That's pretty good. If anybody's ever played Guard, you know that this is unseen. And Strength 5 is pretty good too. You're going to be killing other sisters, or wounding other sisters and wounding Space Marines fairly easily. Then we have our Repentia squad. Those sisters that have to charge into battle with nothing but a chainsword. And 2-handed chainswords are called Eviscerators. We have a Mortifier, which is a version of the Penitent Engine. I think the difference between that and the Penitent Engine, I guess we can take a look. So the Penitent Engines are here. They get flamers and buzz blades. These get heavy bolters and buzz blades. So gun versus flamethrower. They both get invulnerable saves, so the AP, which usually worsens your saving throw, is unaffected. Well, it's a 6, so not like it matters all that much, but you will get to save it eventually. It's not like you can't save it like some armies. And of course the Arco-Flagellants, they also have that 6-up Feel No Pain. Or sorry, 6-up invulnerable save. Paragon Warsuits, they also have one. These, I guess, are kind of an intermediary anti-infantry and anti-vehicle, although I think they lean more heavily towards high toughness things, because I mean, they have high strength, low attacks. Usually that's kind of the trade-off you get. You get either a lot of attacks and low strength, no AP, armor penetration, or you get high strength, very few attacks. And for this, you get to re-roll or add 1 to the hit roll and add 1 to the wound roll for vehicles and monsters. So every 3-up is now a 2-up. So you're going to be getting a lot more hits. Now, wounding's another story, because a lot of vehicles are going to be very high toughness. This is a vehicle, and its toughness is 7, so it's not the highest, but a lot of tanks are going to be closer to 9, 10, 11, 12 even. And if you're lower than the toughness of what you're attacking with strength-wise, you can hit it for sure on a 2-up, but you may not be able to wound it. I've always wondered, first of all, what is this? Is it a head? Alright, that aside, I've always wondered if some of the rhinos that the Sisters of Battle are using, if they're just straight up producing their own on the Forge Worlds, or if some of these are going to be recycled from Space Marine chapters when they got the bigger repulsor vehicles. I have one over here. It's not painted yet, but so the rhinos are smaller than what the new generation of Space Marine is able to be accommodated by. So these large repulsor vehicles can house the taller new generation of Space Marine. The older vehicles cannot house or transport the taller Space Marines, so I've wondered if some of the ones that couldn't be used for transport anymore are just being passed down to the Sisters of Battle. Maybe not. Some more vehicles, the Exorcist and the Castigator. I've always been partial to tanks with big guns, as evidenced by my vehicle over there. It's got a very large plasma weapon. The Castigator here has a battle cannon. And it says, Castigators are powerful battle tanks of the Adepta Sororitas. They provide excellent fire support for Battle Sisters thanks to their varied weapon systems, smashing through the foe's lines and slaughtering great swaths of enemy infantry in seconds. I don't know about slaughtering swaths. They have 3 heavy bolters, and they can get 1 storm bolter extra, but that may not be swaths. Although if you have sustained hits on 3 heavy bolters, you're probably going to get like 10 hits on infantry. And with 5 strength, you have a good chance of wounding. AP -1 ain't bad either. Maybe I take back what I said. If you have a pretty fragile infantry unit, some orc boys, or maybe some Gene Stealer cultists, maybe you could chop through them pretty good. We have Crusade, which I've only dabbled in a little bit. The Crusade system is a little complex. It's kind of hard when everybody has their own army to kind of keep up with each other, and it's a lot of self-discipline. Some people want to be casual gamers, and they shouldn't feel the pressure of having to Crusade, but once you take the step into Crusade, if you're a casual gamer, sometimes it can be overwhelming. There's a lot to keep track of. So, for the Sisters, you have these trials that you have to undergo, which is to elevate a warrior to that of a living saint. So, and like I said, I don't play Sisters, so I don't know all of this, but I do like this system, though. This has always been fun to me. After you complete a game, and the units have traits, or they have experience points. To get a trait, you roll a d6, and whatever your result is, that's the one you get. So, of course, you could always just play with your friends, and you can pick whatever you want, but it is a little bit more fun when you can't just game the system and you roll a d6 and see what luck brings you. Like for the characters, you have deeds, not words. This warrior never speaks unless it is to exalt the God Emperor. Wherever their faithful followers fight against the darkness, this leader will be at the forefront, taking the fight to the foe. Roll a d6. On a result of 1 or 2, you get this ability, and for all subsequent games, as long as this model lives, each time this model makes an attack, you can reroll the hit roll and you can reroll the wound roll. So that's pretty good. Although I'd rather have this Aegis of Belief on a roll of 3 or 4. This leader has such strong of belief. This leader has such strength of belief that they refuse to yield their faith in the Emperor proof against any harm. Which grants you a Feel No Pain 5-up, not just against mortal wounds, against anything. And then at the start of your command phase, you regain 1 lost wound. So if you have an important character that has a lot of wounds, like maybe Morven Vol, if you're permitting her to be in there, then you regain wounds once per turn, as well as having a Feel No Pain 5-up, so it's pretty good. Here they are again, Order of the Bloody Rose, and they're fighting the new Dwarven faction that came out a couple years ago. You get these Crusade relics as well. And they also give you quite a bit of abilities. So this is how you keep track of your Crusade rules. You're supposed to scan these pages with your printer, and that way you keep track. So I'll rotate this real quick. I think this is a good stopping point. My phone kicked on and said that I was running out of memory, so you'll have to go through all the Crusade stuff. I think ending here on this picture of the Sisters Gathered is probably a good stopping point. If you do watch the end, I thank you. I think there's going to be some more of these videos to come. I don't really know what I want to do with this channel yet, but I like Warhammer, I like Star Wars and science fiction, history and law. I think I just want to use it to read and maybe peruse some of the stuff from my hobbies, so I can be better about being an enjoyer of my hobbies. I've got some better camera equipment and some stands coming in, so hopefully eventually I don't have to have it sitting on this Death Watch box, and then eventually I'll show off some of my models that I have built. I started a brand new army recently, and as I get to finishing parts of it, I think I might showcase some of it here on the channel. But until then, thank you for watching, and have a good rest of your day.